thank you everyone for joining us. If you've been kind of listening in, getting early, you can see that we have a really friendly panel. And so we're very excited to be bringing this presentation to you. Today we're going to be talking about law school personal statements. I did drag a handout that you should be able to download. It has the questions that they're planning to answer. And so you can download that, take notes on that. If you have any other questions that you want the panel to answer, please feel free to type that into the questions box. I'll be monitoring that. Before we get started, I'm gonna let the panel introduce themselves. So Sean, you wanna take it away?
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Sean Adams. I'm the Assistant Director for Recruitment here at the Texas Tech School of Law in Lubbock, Texas. And I am a graduate from the law school. I graduated in 2014 and have been working in admissions for a few years now. So that's me.
Okay, I'm Jacqueline Bell, and I'm the Associate Dean of Admission and Financial Aid here at the Charleston School of Law in Charleston, South Carolina.
I'm Megan Henson.
I've been with the law school for about...
We have a little delay.
Okay. You want me to finish?
Yeah, Jacqueline, if you'll continue.
Yeah, okay. Okay, so I've been here at the Charleston School of Law for about 10 years, and prior to that I worked in higher education in the area of student aid, so that's my background.
Megan?
Okay, we'll see. Can you all hear me? Okay, good. I am Megan Henson. I'm the Senior Associate Director of Admissions at the University of Tulsa College of Law, and I graduated from TU Law back in 2008. Practiced as a public defender for a little while, and then returned to the wonderful world of law school admissions back in 2010. So I've been around for a little while, and I really enjoy both of these fellow panelists I have here, and I'm happy to be here today.
Excellent. Well, with that, we'll just jump right into the, as we can see, you have a broad variety of experiences and a wealth of experiences that are going to be giving you some insight and wisdom today. I know here at the Career Center, we help with personal statements, and so law school statements can often be difficult and deceptively simple. And so I think that we have some really great questions that are going to help you get closer to finding what's going to represent you best in that application. So why don't we just start with a general question. When thinking panelists, when a student is preparing to submit their personal statement, what should they write about? And I'll let if someone wants to jump in and start, we can do that. If the delay continues to impact us, we may just go in that initial introduction order.
Well, I know. Oh, sorry, go ahead. you please go ahead.
Cutting out just a little bit, Megan.
I think it's really important with...
It's cutting out just a little bit, Megan. I'm sorry. Sean, would you mind starting?
Sure. So what we're looking for is for you to, well, at least at our school, and different law schools are looking for different things in your personal statement. So my biggest tip for you, write this in huge bold letters on your notes, is to follow the instructions for the specific law schools that you are applying to. But for us, we're looking for you to tell us a little bit about who you are that we did not glean from the rest of the application. So every single part of the application has a specific purpose. Your resume tells us how you choose to spend your time outside of class or outside of work. Your recommendation letters let us know about your character and work ethic. Your transcripts tell us whether you've taken writing intensive and research intensive courses and how well you did in those, and also did you challenge yourself with other courses, things like that. What I'm looking for in your personal statement is something that I didn't get from the rest of that, and it's something about something you're really proud of, or something that you've overcome, something that shows your your drive, your ambition, your personality, but it should be focused on you. And also, I always tell students, give me at least one sentence that tells me why you want to go to law school. Don't forget to leave that out. Sometimes I read these great letters that tell me about some sort of skill or some sort of interest, and they never tell me why they want to go to law school. So don't forget to add that. Did somebody want to throw some other information in there?
I think you did a really good job covering it. I was looking at my notes and I think you covered almost everything I had written down. But, you know, just remember, this is your opportunity to shine and show your passion and desire about studying law. And when you know, as you start to think about what do I write about, think about your experiences, whether that's study abroad, maybe volunteer work, maybe an experience with a family. Also look at your accomplishments and maybe obstacles that you've overcome. These are good places to start when you try to figure out what should I write about.
I agree with everything that's been said.
We can hear you.
Yes, I switched over to phone, so hopefully that will stop any interference.
Excellent. Thank you, Megan. And thank you, panelists. So thinking about the other side, we're going to talk more about what to do, but just right out of the gate, what are some things that applicants should definitely avoid doing in their personal statement?
Oh, there are several. One thing that I always highlight is I know some students will want to do kind of tailored personal statements for each law school, but one thing that happens every single year is, and it's already happened this year, is we will get personal statements that are directed to another law school, and they will be telling us exactly why they want to go to another law program. And the thing is, it's actually easy to do, because when you draft multiple documents and you're saving them as different names and then you have to upload them, it's an easy mistake to upload the wrong document. And so just double check that. Attention to detail is so important in law school and also in the practice of law. So I would say pay close attention to make sure you're attaching the correct personal statement and make sure that it's proofread, because we can talk all day about what to put in your personal statement, what's going to make it stand out, but we're all really looking at that also to gauge your writing ability. And so you want to make sure that you've had someone proofread it and edit it, and that you're handing in something that's well written.
Absolutely. And consistency throughout your application is important. So if you craft a beautiful personal statement that's perfect in every way, and then you do a addendum and it looks like you wrote it in the car in 5 minutes, that doesn't match, and I wonder what's going on there. But a couple of other things that I like to talk about are if you find yourself writing about somebody that inspires you to want to practice law, make sure that you're writing about yourself and not all about them. I read a personal statement that was beautifully crafted, excellent writing, all about a girl's abuela. And she talked about how she came here with nothing in her pocket and she built a dynasty for her family, and she was so inspirational. And I never learned anything new about the applicant. So if her abuela wants to join our law school, I think she'd be a great candidate, but I don't know anything else about the person who's actually applying. So that's another big one. And if you find yourself writing something along the lines of, my name is Sean Adams, I'm a psychology major from Mount Olive University, you know, that kind of information, remember, we already have that. That's in your transcripts. That's in the rest of your application. For us, we only give you 2 pages double spaced. That's not a lot of real estate. So make sure that it is very focused and intentional with every word.
I think the only thing I would add to that is sometimes people try to restate their resume in the personal statement. We don't need that. We already have your resume. Also, sometimes we see people trying to use legal concepts in the paper, and you use it incorrectly. So, you know, you sort of damned yourself, if you will. So try not to do that. And also remember, you never know who your reader is going to be. So when you write your personal statement, you want to make sure that you don't offend anyone. And it doesn't mean you can't talk about sensitive subjects, but you also never know who's reading your which committee members reading your application and how they feel. They should be unbiased, but you never know. So I think being careful about that. And then to reiterate again, please don't rely on spell check. It's not your savior. You've got to proofread over and over and over and get somebody else to do it as well.
Yeah, don't try to use legalese or impress us with your $10 words. It's hard to read and it just comes off as just not great.
One thing that I think prospective students will do, and it's something that seems easy, and they want that answer of what should I put in my personal statement. So they'll go onto the wonderful World Wide Web and they will Google what is a good law school personal statement. And then they'll read a couple of examples and they'll say, oh, I like these three. So they'll take those three and they'll try to wedge their life story into the theme or into the pattern that's within these multiple personal statements. And then it comes to us and it's a little choppy and you can tell it's not flowing. And there have been some years where I have seen the same theme multiple times and I've said, oh, that must have been on a Google search because I'm seeing the same theme showing up multiple times. And so, you know, when you're unsure about what to write about, I think it's okay to go read a few, but it's important to step back and realize this is our chance to get to know you. So many factors in the applications are numbers and credentials, and this is your opportunity to have a voice for yourself. And so don't lose that by trying to fit into someone else's voice. So take a moment and reflect and let your story be yours, not a sample that you've read on the internet.
I think that's really great advice. I think applicants spend a lot of time trying to be the best version of themselves that they forget who they are. And we want to admit the person, not the polished version or just that. So that's really, really great insight. Thinking about the next question. So what are some tips for a successful personal statement? I know we've kind of talked about that a little bit, talked about what not to avoid, but what should they do in addition to the things that we've talked about? Jacqueline, do you want to start this one?
Okay. Well, I think, first of all, if you've decided on a theme or a topic, then probably discuss that with someone that you trust, make an outline, write a first draft. I think another great way to have a successful personal statement also is you need to capture the reader in that first paragraph. That's so critical because we read many personal statements and applications, thousands probably, and we get tired and you don't know what time of the day we're reading it. So, you know, you want to catch our attention and you want to hold our attention through the entire statement because you want us to read every word of it and not want to skip any of it. So I think that's important. You know, be organized, focus on, you know, organization, and that sort of thing. And then once again, have someone else read it and proofread it and bounce these ideas off of other people. And I think they can help you sort of tailor your personal statement.
I like to tell students, sorry.
Go ahead, John. Me and Sean do mini panels together, and we do this often. So please proceed. She
and I think an awful lot alike. But I like to tell students to focus on one thing. Now, this can be something that you're proud of. This could be something that you've overcome, a special skill that you've developed over years, you know, something like that. But choose one thing. If you try to throw everything in the kitchen sink about how amazing you are in one, you know, 2-page double-spaced for us essay, it's going to come up jumbled and unfocused. So if you have lots of great ideas for what you want to write about, I like to tell students to take out a sheet of paper for every single idea that you have and write the idea up at the top and then bullet point out what you might say about each idea. And at the end of that, some of them will clearly be not great and some of them might be really strong. You may have the idea for your personal statement and maybe a diversity statement, which you could write separately so you could give us more information. So that could kind of help you focus on what you want to do. Of course, have people definitely read it. When you're done with it, have somebody read it that maybe doesn't know you as well, and that way you can ask them, like, what did you get from this, and see if they got the point that you were trying to make or not. One of the things I want to go back to the last question about is this just came to mind when I was listening earlier, but we are all living in the time of COVID right now. So unless you have an extraordinary event that has happened during this time, please don't write about COVID and how you had to leave school and do online and everything, because we have all gone through that and we'll just end up reading the same essay over and over and over again. You want to stand out. So you want to tell us something unique about you, about your perspective. And another thing is keep it positive. This is your opportunity to sort of sell yourself to the admissions counselor and make them think, man, I think they'd be a great fit for our community. I love their unique perspective. I'd love for them to share that with other people. This is not the time for you to go over, not great grades. That's what a grade addendum is for. This is your time to focus on something good, something that you've learned, something that has encouraged you in life, or some great life lesson, something like that. That's what you want to tell us about. And then again, what makes you want to do law. So, sorry, Megan.
Absolutely. No, you're fine. You covered exactly what I was going to talk about, which is keep it positive, advocate for yourself, move anything that may be a red flag into an addendum. The last thing I would say about having a successful personal statement, and I know we've kind of mentioned it throughout, but make sure you read those instructions. As Sean has mentioned, theirs is 1 to 2 pages double spaced. Ours is 1 to 3 pages double spaced. Some law schools will have a prompt that they actually want you to write about something specific. Others is open-ended. And so you need to make sure that you are providing to the school what they're asking for. So if I get a 4-page statement that's single spaced and it's, they didn't even read the instructions for what we're asking for, I just think it's important to read those instructions.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you. So thinking about the next piece, I know you've kind of mentioned, and Sean, you talked about a grade addendum and lots of diversity statements. So there's a lot of different things that could go into the application, and it sounds like that varies by school as well. So maybe thinking about the personal statement, how does that fit in? And then also, I know we hadn't maybe discussed this ahead of time, but what are some maybe additional materials that are encouraged either by your programs or that you've seen encouraged universally, such as a grade addendum or anything like that?
Absolutely. So normally you will have the personal statement, and other more narrative documents would be a diversity statement. Some law schools, highly encourage this, others it's optional. Also those addendums. Oftentimes, if you're going to address something that may be, as I said, a potential red flag, a lower GPA, a lower LSAT score, you want to add an addendum to address that. You don't want to leave the committee questioning, why did their GPA suddenly drop off their senior year when classes got more rigorous? Why did they struggle with the LSAT? Are they doing a prep course, or are they just walking in cold? You want to at least provide some insight into what's going on with those credentials. Also, you may be required to submit documentation or statements if there are any affirmative answers on character and fitness questions. I think those can be extremely important to make sure that your application is detailed and includes everything that it needs to include, especially when looking ahead to applying to the bar in the future.
Absolutely. For character and fitness, you do have to disclose academic, disciplinary actions and other things, any run-ins with the law, or, if you had beer in your dorm, something like that. And you need to describe what happened, take responsibility, say what you did to make changes, things like that. But those are great to keep out of your personal statement, because different admissions committee members read things in different orders. So some people will read the personal statement before they read anything else, because they want that to be their first impression of the student. So if they're reading that before your character and fitness statement, you don't want your personal statement to be about, how you were a terrible student or you got in trouble with the law over and over again. Like, that's good for a character and fitness statement. You want to focus on the positive for your personal statement. But yeah, every single part of that application serves a specific purpose. So let each part of those things do what they do. And if you're confused about them for different law schools, reach out to us. We're happy to answer questions about what we're looking for on an application and what you may want to, focus on.
I don't think there's much I can add to that, but I think just remember that it's like you said, the personal statement is just one part of the application, and every part plays an integral role in the decision of whether you're accepted or not. And remember that law schools are looking for well-rounded individuals with diverse backgrounds and life experiences. And in regards to character and fitness and those addendums and your GPAs and those sort of things, yes, please keep those out of your personal statement. Don't write this wonderful personal statement and then end in a downer. You don't want to do that. And every state is a little bit different in schools and what they require for character and fitness. I know in South Carolina, even if a charge has been expunged or even if it was a juvenile charge, it has to be disclosed. So make sure, once again, you read very carefully the instructions for all of the addendums and those sorts of things that can be added to your application.
I always say if you're confused about it, go ahead and err on the side of disclosure, because it's not going to keep you out of law school, but it could get you kicked out of law school, and it could prevent you from being being able to take the bar. So don't do that.
That's a great point. We did have a question in, and I know we talked about reserving questions to the end. This one's very pertinent to this topic. So while we're here, would anyone feel comfortable talking more about what a diversity statement is and what should be included in that?
Yeah. So for us, diversity could mean any number of things. It could be racial diversity, gender diversity, sexual orientation, or any number of things. We've also had great diversity statements from people who lived in a town of 400 growing up and moved to a town of 400,000. So diversity can mean a lot of different things, military background, all kinds of things that give you a unique perspective based on, how you see the world, how you've grown up, the experiences that you've had, and things that you can share with the community once you get here. That's for us. So.
Absolutely. And I would say, diversity can be defined in such a broad fashion, but I do want to sort of echo what Jacqueline had said earlier, which is be cautious to realize that you don't know your audience, and make sure that nothing that you're writing could be seen as offensive. And, you may have someone on the admissions committee who's differently abled or who came from a small town. And I will give a prime example. I had someone write about where they were from in the coal mines of Eastern Kentucky and how they were so behind in their education. And it was a decently written personal statement, except I grew up in the county beside it and I knew they had one of the top schools. And so it was really fascinating to know that everything she was talking about, the struggles of her hometown and highlighting these people, I was like, well, those are my people. And so you never know who's reading your statement, and they probably would have never thought that applying to the University of Tulsa, there was someone from a very small town in the coal mines of Eastern Kentucky sitting there reading their diversity statement, but I was.
I will give one warning. I did read a diversity statement once that actually really bothered me and annoyed me. And it was somebody had taken the idea that they needed a diversity statement. They needed to show something that, showed growth or what have you. And so they talked about her family's luxury vacation on a cruise going to Jamaica, and how when she got there for the 3 days that she was there, the poverty that she saw absolutely changed her life. But she didn't follow that up with, I started working with the poor, I started donating my time and community service. So it was really just, I had an experience and saw poor people, and so it changed me. And I'm like, no, it didn't. And now I'm annoyed. Don't annoy your admissions committee members.
That seems like pretty great universal advice. I know one of our one of the mock interview questions that we'll ask sometimes is, tell me about a professor or faculty member that you didn't like and why. And we had an intern in the past, if the student disclosed a name, she would respond with, oh, that's my cousin. And it really kind of threw them off in the interview, and actually, no, it's not, but you have to be careful about what you say. And so it sounds like, especially Megan, that example that you shared, that you really have to be very mindful of your audience. And that's a really important piece there. So moving into the next question. So you kind of touched on this earlier. This is a definite don't identify the wrong school. But how tailored should a personal statement be to a specific program?
Yeah, so I know I issued my cautionary tale on having multiple personal statements. My general advice is if you have a couple of schools that are your top picks, and you know, if you get into those schools, that's you're going to go. These are your top maybe 3, and you want to do a tailored, personalized statement for that program. I will tell you, when I get a well-written personal statement that is all about why this individual wants to go to my school and why they're going to succeed in specific programs, it's nice. It's nice to have it. And so I think that, you know, those can be great to receive, but you just have to be careful and make sure that you're very organized with using those. So if you're applying broadly, it may be that you can use a more general statement for some schools that you're adding on. But if you want to have a tailored personal statement for a few of your top choices, I definitely don't think it's a bad idea. I just say be careful to make sure you're attaching the appropriate statement to the right application.
My one thing of caution is, oh, I'm so sorry. Did I cut you off?
No, go ahead.
Of course. The one thing about tailoring to a specific school is making sure that you're not losing that, you know, really small amount of real estate that you're writing in to tell me about my program, because I know what my program has. So, you know, if you're writing a whole paragraph on our clinics or whatever it is that you're talking about, you know, advocacy, whatever it is, you know, I don't want you to lose that amount of space talking about yourself. So, you know, it's great when you're like, I can't wait to go to Texas Tech. It's been a dream of mine since I was little. That's great. That's 2 sentences. That's perfect. But if you're adding a lot of information, you're losing space to talk about yourself.
I don't have anything else to add other than I'll just reiterate again what we said earlier. Just, you know, make sure you're if the school directs you to talk about a specific subject or topic, just make sure you do that. Don't lose that in the instructions and think, oh, well, let me write about this school. Here's my experience. You know, here's why I want to go there, and not answer the question that the schools ask you.
That's a great point. So thinking about this next piece, I know that y'all have talked about personal statement is overall kind of a positive document. We want to definitely end on a positive note. I think that someone, maybe it was Sean, that had mentioned it's okay to talk about maybe a challenge that you've overcome to get to where you're at. Thinking about this question though, and Jacqueline, I'll let you start with this one, but how personal is too personal? So I know here at the Career Center, we'll work with students and sometimes they get pretty detailed about a traumatic experience they've encountered. And so there's definitely a balance of wanting them to feel like they're telling their story and being true to themselves, but also maybe not disclosing more than is necessary to future instructors and colleagues. And so thinking about that, how personal is too personal for a personal statement?
I think that's probably a really personal, no pun intended, opinion. And the reason I say that, and Sean, you and Megan may have seen it this past week, there was this whole thread on the Associate Dean's list about this exact subject. And there were so many different opinions about what was too personal and if it was too personal. I think that you have to, if it's a story that you want to share and then you're threading it into how that experience has molded you and made you who you are, I think as long as you keep that thread throughout the personal statement and have you end, you may not end on the happiest note, but it makes you who you are today. I personally think it's okay to talk about that. And I had written down an example of a personal statement I read this past year, and this applicant wrote about, you know, a $25 bill and how his dad gave him this $25 bill to go to the store to buy something specific. And when he came home, his father had committed suicide and he found him. And he took that, though. That's a really personal thing. And it broke my heart, you know, to read it. But then he wrote about what he took from that and how it made him who he is today and why he wanted to go to law school. And he did such a great job of tying that in. So I think it, you know, I don't think you can just put it out there and not tie it in. But if you can tie it in, I think it can make a really beautiful story and a great personal statement, because it, at the end of the day, you know, if I'd only had one seat, he'd have gotten it just from what, you know, from that, withholding anything else that was bad in there. So that's my opinion.
I 100% agree with you. I think it depends on what you want to share. We're not going to ask you to share anything that you don't want to, but I've read everything, you know, from losing people to violence to, you know, homes being destroyed to, you know, suicide, mental health issues, you know, living in your car, all kind, you know, struggling academically through college, not because of the rigor of the classes, but because you're raising your two siblings, because your parents are gone, like things like that. You know, those are incredible, you know, stories of PTSD. Anything that you want to share like that, you can, but always tie it back to, you know, how hopefully it made you stronger. It made you realize that you want to go out and help others, and always tie it back to how you want, why you've chosen law. So, yeah.
Yeah, I agree with everything that's been said. And I will say, you know, members of our admissions committee are all extremely professional, and we read so many applications that, you know, faculty and administration are not going to see someone check in at orientation and say, oh, that's the girl that wrote about her sexual assault. Like we read hundreds, over 1,000 applications a year. So, you know, we've read some, you know, really painful statements, but again, whatever you want to disclose, but I do think it's important to, as both of my colleagues have said, tie that in, and don't just write about the obstacles that you've overcome back to back to back without bringing it a little uplifting as to what you learned from that and how you're going to project forward based on those lessons. Because I have read personal statements that it's just paragraph after paragraph after paragraph of all of these obstacles. And as Sean mentioned, sometimes just bring it into one and let us hear about what came from that. Because, you know, you finish the statement and say, I don't know what to take from this, other than they had a lot of hardship, which, you know, I can feel for that. But if I don't see that passion for law and that seriousness of purpose for this next step and why this is the result of those hardships you discuss, you kind of lose the point of the statement.
Exactly. So kind of what I'm getting, Jacqueline, I think you said it really well in terms of it has to be intentional. If we're including something at that point, it needs to be something that we don't just leave in the statement, that it's well woven into the fabric of the story, and there's a clear purpose as to why we're disclosing this information. And I think that's really helpful. Something that I think we consistently hear is that above all, a personal statement should be well written. And I think you all are echoing that very well. Thinking about this next piece. So with all of your experience, this is actually a question that our panelists suggested that we include in their presentation today. So thinking about both good and bad, and we have had a question come in of what's the best personal statement you've ever read. So what are some examples that, obviously respecting applicant privacy, but what are some examples you can share on both sides, the good and the bad?
So I know I brought this up just because I've had some doozies, and I think that they can be fun to sort of highlight some of the ones that we get that make us laugh. And you know, I had one time who the matter of the personal statement actually could have been very serious, but this individual had a health issue where they had a tumor on their neck. And so instead of relaying kind of the struggle and the obstacle of this, we got the story about how this individual named the tumor and how he referred to his personal statement the whole time was out of the perspective of his tumor named, I think it was Bob. And we finished the statement and just thought, why? You know, there was so much more you could have did with the statement, and I just read 3 pages about your health issue, but it was written in the terms of I had a tumor and I gave it a name, and this is my friend that went with me through grade school. And just completely missed the point. I had another personal statement that was kind of average and fairly well written, and they closed it with a quote. And it was one of those quotes where I thought, I know that, but they didn't cite it. And I was like, that sounds familiar. And 3 weeks later, I realized it was from Talladega Nights, and it was the scene with like Ricky Bobby, where the girl was trying to cheer him back on to get on his white horse and charge forward. And so they closed out the personal statement with a quote from a funny comedy movie. And, you know, it left us thinking, but we were thought, you know, when you're applying to a professional school, I do think you want to realize that while I had seen it and laughed a little bit, some of the professors probably not so much. And it's just using good judgment with what you're putting into the personal statement, and making sure, as we've mentioned so many times, that somewhere within that, you're letting us know about your reason for this journey and why you want to go to law school. And in terms of some of the, you know, best personal statements I've read, it's those that are just honest, and it's their story, and it gives us insight. It doesn't always have to be obstacles that you've overcome. I mean, I've had statements that made me cry, and I got up and I walked around the building for a few minutes just to breathe, and say, okay, I'm going to come back because that one was heavy, and that's okay. But also, one of the best personal statements I've ever read was from a girl who just said, this is what I'm good at. I've always been analytical. I read stories, and this is what I'm passionate about, and I evaluate my life, and I really can't see myself doing anything else. And she said it in such an elegant way over a couple of paragraphs, and it was simple and it was straightforward, but it told me a lot about her. And I thought, this is someone who sat down with their computer or a pen and paper and just started writing. They didn't read samples. It wasn't tied in from themes or anything else. It was just a straight look at her and why she's going to be a good lawyer, because it's just ingrained into her skills and her nature. And I finished, and it was short. It was under 2 pages. And I thought, that's a good statement. Mm-hmm. And so you never know what you're going to get. There's some great ones out there.
Declan, did you want to go?
Dawn, you can go.
Okay. I have one that was, I would term, I guess, bad, that I really did not enjoy. And that was somebody who wrote, they were trying to impress us. You could tell that they used a lot of legalese and, you know, big letter words. But the crux of what they wrote was, in college, I had this horrible professor who just would not give me a fair shake with grading. And so, you know, I fought with him over and over again. I would fight with him in class. I fought with him after class. I'd go to his office, but I wasn't getting anywhere. So I had to go to the dean and I had to raise it to like certain levels. But sure enough, what I got out of that was, you know, I was able to retake a final under another professor and this, that, and the other. And I'm like, okay. And that's why he believed that he would be an amazing attorney and great in law school, is because, you know, he fights tooth and nail and like, you know, a dog with a bone to right injustices. And, you know, I was just thinking, God, the professors at our law school would kill me if I was this person into their class. I'm like, I don't know that you're a great fit for our law school community, but there's probably one out there that will love you. It's just not us. So I voted no on that student. But, you know, think about what you're writing and how it's going to come across to others. You know, so many people say, I want to be an attorney because I've always loved to fight. You know, people tell me, oh, you argue all the time. That's going to make you a great attorney. That's not necessarily true. But I'll give you 2 very brief ones, but they're my favorites of all time. One was an athlete, a student athlete. And so they wrote about the last game. They were a baseball player. It was the last game of their college, you know, life, and they knew they weren't going to go pro. So it started pretty generically with the crack of the bat and the roar of the crowd. And I was like, oh God. But they talked about the dedication and the sacrifice that it took to get to that point. How, you know, since they were playing t-ball as a little kid, or in junior high and high school, where they were waking up early to go to practice and staying out late to go to practice and missing parties with their friends and missing dates with girls that they liked. But their school was depending on them for a win. Their teammates were depending on them, and their family was depending on them to get a scholarship to go to college. And so, no matter how sick and tired and how they didn't want to play sometimes, they still stayed with it because people were depending on them. And he didn't want to let anybody down. And then he switched and he transitioned into, I know when I'm an attorney, there are going to be times when I'll have family issues, money issues, when I'm tired, when I'm sick, when I just don't want to do it. But I know that my clients are depending on me every single day for their livelihoods, for their family, for their freedom and for their life. So I have to show up and be there 100%. And what I learned from that person is they're mature, they're dedicated, they sacrifice to reach their goals. They have a service heart to others. Makes you a really great attorney in the future. So that was a yes for me. And then the second one was about building a flight of stairs, which sounds incredibly boring to write about. But from the time he was old enough to swing a hammer, he was helping his father, who's a carpenter, build homes. And his father had him building staircases. And when you start one, you have to build a strong foundation because everything goes above that. And with each rise of the steps, you have to be precise with them because if they're off by 1/4 of an inch, people can trip and really hurt themselves. And so his father, when he would make mistakes, his father made him redo it, tear it all apart, start over. And it was really frustrating and irritating to him. But over time, he developed this skill and this craft. And he could build these beautiful spiral staircases with all these flourishes in them. And at the end of each staircase, he'd go up to the top to test it out. And he'd look back at everything that he's accomplished and be very proud of his work, but know that he's not done yet. The house isn't finished. And he transitioned, because I love a good transition, he transitioned very quickly into, in life, you have to have a strong foundation and everything builds on that. And you're going to make mistakes, but you need to learn to fix those mistakes. You need to learn to go back and really develop your skills, that you are building something, a path for other people to follow, because you never know who you're actually a mentor to. And you can look back over all of your accomplishments, but know that you're not done yet. You still have the rest of your life to get even better. And I thought, if you can persuade me with a flight of stairs, you can probably persuade a jury. And again, I learned you're mature, you're dedicated. You will put in the work to hone your craft. So.
Okay, so to leave some time for questions, I'm gonna do two quickly. The first one's like really short. Probably the worst personal statement I ever read was 4 sentences, and I had no idea what they wrote in those 4 sentences because that was the extent of it. I think they told me their name and where they went to school and they wanted to go to law school, and there was one more sentence and that was it. So don't do that. Have no idea. I was like, you didn't really have anything to tell, so I don't know, but that was a really weird personal statement, I thought. But probably one of my favorites that I've read, and I'll never forget, and it was one of the first ones I read when I started reading files 10 years ago, but this young man wrote about his best friend, and he wrote about how he met his best friend when he was like 4 or 5 years old, and he talked about how his best friend walked through every year of life with him and the values that his best friend taught him, to be honest, to be a team player, to be persistent. And I thought the entire time that he was talking about a person, and at the end of the statement, he was talking about football. And so it was all about football. And it was so well written. I could not lay it down. I could not stop reading it. I read it more than one time. But at the end, he actually said, I walked away from my best friend in my junior year of college to prepare to go to law school. And it was just so well written. And then at the end, he disclosed that his best friend was football. So that's my favorite. But I like sports. So when you told the baseball story, I like that. And I like the stair story too. That's a great one. But, everybody has their own story to tell. You just have to look within yourself and find what it is and share it.
That's fantastic. It makes me want to read some of these statements because I can just imagine not wanting to put them down, and then some very quickly putting them down. But so turning to the questions that we got from the questions on the slide too, but that we got from the audience. So this is very related to what you're talking about. So if you have anything to add on that, but someone was very curious about specifically the attention grabber. I know it came up previously that we got to hook the reader in right out of the gate and keep them engaged the whole time. And so what is from your perspective, what does an effective attention grabber look like?
Ooh. They're all so different.
Yeah.
That's a really hard question. Maybe not a quote. It's so many, and there's some inspirational quotes, and then they'll lead into their story, and it's fine. It's just not gonna stand out or be something that grabs our attention. Sometimes if you're gonna be highlighting, those obstacles, sometimes they start these statements kind of in that really hard time, and then you do dive in to say, okay, what's going to happen here? But it's hard to pinpoint like what that is going to be for anyone not knowing what their story is going to be and what they're going to highlight. But yeah, that's a good question.
I mean, it's usually one-liners, but because everything should be so completely different and you should be, unique in your story, it's hard to like give you examples. But I was trying to think of some, and things like, I was never supposed to graduate from high school. Like that kind of reels me in. I'm like, what do you mean? Things like that. Or, that kidnapping changed my life. Witnessing that kidnapping changed my life. And I'm like, all right, do tell. So think about, sometimes news headlines that kind of grab you, but make sure that they're full sentences, that they are professional, and that they really do, lead to your story. That is a hard one. I can't really give you great examples, but those were two that came to mind.
One that I don't enjoy, and we get often, well, kind of two, is, I grew up watching blank movie over and over. Legally Blonde, over and over. And the other one that we get often that I would say steer away from is, this personal statement was so hard for me to write. I thought about what is it I could tell you about myself, and I'll have a whole paragraph about how this was just a hard statement to write. And I'm like, it's a hard statement for everyone to write. Don't linger on that. We know it's hard for everyone. Let's get into the story here.
That is a space taker. That is, I don't have enough of a story to tell you, so I'm going to tell you about my thought process leading up to what I'm going to tell you. And that is not a good thing to start with. Don't do that. I never appreciate those.
And we get many every year.
Yeah. So then thinking about that, so we definitely want to keep our audience in mind when we're writing that personal statement. So who would, based on your experience and maybe your program specifically, who is the audience? Who's on that admissions committee? And is it faculty, staff? Tell us about that.
Faculty for us. So yeah.
It's a combination of admissions, administration, and then faculty. So yeah.
So for us, it's myself, the admissions office, and then our admission committee is a 5 faculty member committee. There are some schools that have students as well, so it could be, you never really know who the committee is, so it could be anyone at the college or university.
Yeah.
Good point. So one question that came up, maybe, and this was just for me, it hasn't been asked by the students, but specifically earlier we were talking about the grade addendum and don't talk about COVID because we all experience COVID. So kind of at the intersection of those two things. So I think that a lot of students may have had difficulty adjusting to online, or they had very difficult family circumstances. So if they're worried about that impacting their competitiveness in terms of grades or even any experiences that they maybe missed out on because of COVID, how would you recommend they address that in their application?
I've had a student who talked to me about this recently because they had an internship set up, and their community service that they were going to do, they can't do anymore because it's not live. So they were asking, what do I put on my resume now? Because I don't have the community service or the leadership that I was going to have. I had it set up. And I told them that's something you can just explain, that you were elected as the leader of the student organization, but because of COVID, simply due to COVID, that little phrase, due to COVID, our activities were suspended, but it shows me like you were elected, you had this thing set up, so there's ways to address that.
I think that's a great point. Something I've seen kind of in some forums recommending putting it on your resume if you had an internship offer rescinded or something, but it sounds like that it's definitely something that y'all want to hear about, rather than just leaving it off completely.
Yeah, I mean, if you earned a spot, that's great. Just remember to be brief. Be brief in, what you're writing about. Give us the information that we need, but be brief because, we have to read a ton of these things. So again, it's keeping your admissions committee members happy and, giving them the information that they need without making them read a page of why COVID stopped your community service. So.
Absolutely. Okay, excellent. Well, we are just about out, we have about 10 minutes left. So with that in mind, again, if you have any questions, make sure that you type those into the questions box, but I'll give each panelist the chance to give kind of one closing piece of advice, if they have anything they want to add on that they didn't talk about already. And then anything else that they want to talk about in terms of their program specifically, before we wrap up at 3. Jacqueline, do you want to start?
I don't know that I have any more tips. I think we've probably covered almost every end of the spectrum with those, but I'll reiterate again, follow the instructions, read carefully, give complete answers to the questions that we ask, and don't say things like see my resume, because if you load your resume wrong, I've had resumes be like blank sheets of paper. So if I was waiting to read your resume to know anything about you, then I still didn't know anything. So just, be cognizant of those things. And then in regards to the Charleston School of Law, I mean, we offer a JD. We're a standalone law school. We have a spring start as well as a fall start. So if there's folks out there that's interested in starting school in January, we certainly have a program. Those students finish in 2.5 years with the same students that start in the fall. Our application is available, and we do automatically waive the application fee, and your application for admission is your application for merit. So in a nutshell, I guess that's it. And please let me know if I can ever be of assistance. And if you ever get to Charleston, you're welcome to come visit us.
Megan, do you want to go next?
Sure. So the last thing I would kind of say with regard to personal statements is realize that this is one component of your overall application. And, we can talk for a full hour about what would make a strong personal statement, but you also have to make sure that your application as a whole is strong as well. And so I can read an amazing personal statement, but if their GPA is a 2.1 and they have not done well on the LSAT, that question of can this student come in and handle the academic rigor of law school, that is a huge red flag. And so I think when you're looking at the personal statement, take it seriously, think about it, make sure it's well written, but also realize that that's one component of a full application. So I know it's probably the hardest part of the application because you actually have to reflect and write about you, and most of us are not comfortable advocating for ourselves, but realize there are so many other factors of your application that are going to carry a lot of weight. So if you've studied and did well on the LSAT and you have a strong GPA and you know that you were active in those classes and you're confident those professors are going to write you a good letter of recommendation, then really look at that personal statement for what it is. Another component of the application, don't worry about it too much, but take it seriously. Because I have people who will just sit on a personal statement for weeks and weeks, and really it just doesn't need that sometimes. And so that would be my last advice, is realize, I know it's hard to write it, but don't put too much weight on it. Just take it seriously. So with regards to the University of Tulsa, we are a smaller private school just north of Texas and Oklahoma. We have about 330 students total in our College of Law. Our tuition is just $26,098 as a private school, so there's no in-state, out-of-state tuition difference, which is really nice because it makes us competitive with state school tuition kind of all over the country. And so we do have a very geographically diverse class. We have about 42% of our last year in class is from outside the state of Oklahoma. The class before that was 50%. So we have students from all over. We're trying to take the bar in other states. So, I think we have a great quality program, and I would be happy to answer any follow-up questions that anyone may have. We are doing one-on-one campus visits. I will say that currently, so long as our COVID numbers stay good, which they have so far.
Nice. Hi, everybody. Let's see. Everybody's covered pretty much what you need in a personal statement. My last piece of advice is when you're starting to write it, especially if you're struggling, but you found your topic, you know what you want to write about, but you're trying to figure out how to get it within the page limits or what have you. My favorite thing to do is actually just free write. If you write up to 10 pages, that's fine. You're of course going to have to cut that back down to the page limit that you have, but it allows you to get all of your ideas out, and then you can trim it back, decide what you don't really need, and that way you can kind of hone it down to the page limit and what you really want to get across to us. That's out of everything, to follow the instructions, be yourself, give us some unique aspect of you, and let us know why you think, or let us know what it is about you that would make you a great person to bring into our community, because that's what we're looking for. Why would you be a great advocate for others in the future, and what about you would make you great for our community? And then as far as Texas Tech School of Law, we're here in Lubbock, Texas. It is a state school. Our overall cost of attendance, which includes tuition, fees, the cost of living, transportation, books, all those things, is just under $43,000 a year. So we are the best value school for Texas, and one of the best value schools in the nation. We have a high bar passage rate, high employment rate, which is great because you want to get out with the least amount of debt, pass the bar, and get a job. So it's a great community. It's very student-centered. This past year, we had 36% students of color, so we're a very diverse community, and we love that. And we look forward to getting your application. And if you have any questions, we are doing virtual tours right now. We do not have in-person tours, but as soon as that opens back up, we'll be happy to give you one. But please reach out with any questions that you have. We like to schedule one-on-one Zoom meetings so we can answer any questions that you have about the program, about the application, and about the law school. So.
Excellent. Well, thank you all so much for your perspectives, for your time this afternoon. All of these panelists are registered for the Texas Tech Graduate and Professional School Virtual Fair. That'll be on Thursday, November 5th. So they each have the opportunity to present on their program, but they'll also be hosting drop-in hours. So please register, please come. If you have any questions, I'm also happy to share any contact information for any of the panelists as well. If you're currently working on your personal statement and you need an extra set of eyes, one of the thing that they kept saying was get someone else to look at it. You can do that through the University Career Center. We do have one grammar expert, Donna Schrader, but the rest of us do not pretend to be grammar experts, but we will definitely help you make sure that you're telling your story in a way that's compelling and competitive. And with that, we'll wrap today up. Thank you again, panelists. This has been very informative, I think, for all attendees and myself as well. I took some pretty extensive notes. And so if there's anything that you need, please feel free to reach out.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Bye.
Bye.